on policy analytics from Mr. Barry Gardner. So if you'd be willing to come up to the microphone and get us, kick off our meeting. So thank you so much for coming tonight and be willing to meet with us.
Great, thank you. Do I need to?
I think you should be good.
You're all set.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Well, appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight with the board. So Barry Gardner with Policy Analytics. So a little bit about us. So Policy Analytics is a firm based out of Indianapolis. We've been around for about 20 years, really specializing in the property tax space, understanding assessed value, understanding tax rates, and what those implications are for government units. So we work with cities, towns, the state of Indiana, and obviously school districts. I joined Policy Analytics about 18 months ago. Previously, I spent 23 years in public education, taught as an administrator. Spent my last 10 years in school finance, in a couple of different districts as CFO and as assistant superintendent for finance. And so have a background kind of within this work. And so tonight we are here just to talk a little bit about the tax base that the school district has here in Tipton, what that means when it comes to your property tax revenues, which then also can impact your education fund revenues in terms of the transfer from education to operations fund, and what we may see in terms of some things moving forward or some things being aware of as we start to get closer and closer to a legislative session that I think is going to be really interesting because if you've been paying attention, there's been a lot of talk about property tax reform. All three gubernatorial candidates came out with some sort of platform on property tax reform. Governor-elect Ron has put out multiple plans when it comes to property tax reform. And the easiest way to kind of think about that, right, is if I'm reforming property taxes and I say I want homeowners to pay less, that typically means less revenue coming for the school district potentially, right? And so what's that mean? What's that look like? So no crystal ball here tonight. I don't have any of those answers yet because we'll see what the legislative process will bring. But just a little bit maybe for the district to understand of things to be aware of, right? And what that might look like in terms of some things, at least we know they're talking about tonight. So feel free, please, as we go through this, to ask any questions, ask me to pause, to go through anything. I want this to be helpful for all of you. So any dialogue you want to have about any of this, don't hesitate to interrupt and ask. So Dr. Glaze, we'll kind of move forward. So one of the first pieces that we do with our analysis at Policy Analytics is start to understand the makeup of the school district. And so what this first slide really shows us, the map there on the left-hand side, the outline is Tipton School District. So that is the Tipton School District boundary. And then within it, you see multiple colors that represent different taxing districts because there are unique taxing districts within each of these areas of the community that also set their own potential tax rates. Those are listed there on the right. And so you can see the different units. So we have the county has a tax rate, the school's tax rate, a township tax rate. We often refer to those, you may sometimes if you hear the term overlapping tax districts, right? Because they stack on top of each other. Because at the end of the day, the homeowner is taxed at that total number at the very top. And the school district's rate is a part of that. And inside of that, we have what we call incorporated and unincorporated. Unincorporated are areas that don't have a municipal tax. They don't have a city or a town associated with them. And typically what we find happening is when we have extra units of government stacked, like we see in some of those cases, we see higher tax rates, which then contributes to a term you may have heard called circuit breaker, right? And circuit breaker, if you're not familiar with it, is dollars that the district doesn't collect because a homeowner can only pay so much in property taxes. You've heard of the 1%, 2%, and 3% caps, right? So if my tax bill is $2,200, but my home is worth $200,000, I can only pay $2,000 in taxes. That $200 is what we call circuit breaker loss that's not collected. And that happens when you have rates that start to get above $2 in totality. So you have a few districts that have tax rates over $2, which means you're going to have some circuit breaker here in the district that impacts kind of the overall operations fund, how much money you receive at the end of the day, all right? So then the next piece is we start to look at a couple of things here within this chart. One, where does your assessed value sit within your community? And as you see on here, it's spread out kind of through some different townships. It's not all centrally located in one particular taxing district. And on the right-hand side, where you see the parcel count and the parcel count at the cap, that shows us how many units are at what we would say that cap. They reach the limit of what they can pay. And when we say parcels, just so we understand the definition, that's any piece of property. So that could be a home, it could be farmland, it could be a business. All of those count as parcels. The first ones that are going to hit the cap are homes, because the 1% hit the cap first, then the 2%. And so you can see the majority of what we see districts at the cap is Tipton taxing district. And if you were to flip back in the presentation, you would see it has over a $3 tax rate. We would expect that. Again, when we have that higher tax rate, we're going to have more parcels hitting the cap. And then it's just shown graphically there within the community. And the reason we look at this is because districts, when we talk about your tax rate and the school's tax rate, that 91 cent rate, right? Whether you move that up or down has different impact in each of these areas. Because if homes are at the cap, it doesn't matter if you raise your rate up or down. That taxpayer is not going to notice a difference on the bill. But if then there are areas where they're not at the cap in some of the township areas and that rate moves up and down, they may see relief or see additional liability in their tax bill based on that rate, right? So we call it tax rate sensitivity, and it's really different in each of these areas depending on what homeowners are. So that makes it a really complicated proposal to go out and talk about tax rates and what people are paying, because where they live and what their tax rate is could look really different, even though they're all in the Tipton School District, right? Yes.
The Elwood Civic Center, is that considered West Elwood?
If you go back to the map within that piece, it's outlined there in the red, and I think it's just a small, sorry,
Yeah, it's like tiny.
yeah, it's just a small sliver there off to that piece, so yes.
Okay. So as a farmer, a few years ago, I was encouraged to combine my parcels.
Hmm.
And so where I might have one, what I call a farm, might have been in 3 parcels. And I combined them.
Okay.
Because I don't need my list to be this long, because I'm not trying to impress anybody with how much farm ground we have or don't have. Okay? So, what effect did that have?
So given that it's the unique piece when things are assessed, okay, when properties are assessed, is within, let's use this kind of here as this map, right, of this pedestal. I can be on the same piece of property and I can have different taxing rates I can have a 1% residential, I can have a 2% farmland, and I can have a 3% commercial, all on the same piece of property.
But they're all
So when
different
you,
parcels.
I'm sorry?
They would be different parcels.
Well, then each parcel is individually evaluated in that manner for what is sitting on that piece of property. So what they would look at is it farmland? So if you combined your parcels and it's all farmland, it really doesn't change the math. It's still all farmland. It's really what the component that's sitting on that parcel is comprised of, whether it's residential, whether it's farmland, or whether it's a business or commercial. Does that
That helps.
make sense? I know it can be complicated in those pieces. Okay.
Sorry, thank you.
So then, one of the things that we look at for the school district is what changes in assessed value. So each year, the way our assessment system works is the county assessor goes out and assesses all of the properties, determines the new values within those properties, and then assigns a new assessed value. And that's what we call the growth, right? How much did my home increase in value? So if my home was worth 200,000 last year, and now it's worth 210,000, that's the assessed value growth within that. And so this is the year over change in what we call gross assessed value. And gross assessed value is before any kind of deduction. So if you've ever looked at your home bill, there's a standard deduction of $48,000, and there's a supplemental deduction that's in most years been 35%. So you're not taxed on the 200,000, you're taxed on a lesser amount after what we call net assessed value. But we look at gross to start, and you can see the district had a gross assessed value for 2025's budget of about 5.6%. And we can look to see where that growth came from. The column on the left breaks down what percentage each of the categories makes up of your overall assessed value. So you're about 57% residential. So about 57% of your assessed value base is in homes. You can see apartments make up a very small part. Your commercial makes up a small part. And then you've got about, again, 34% that's agricultural or personal property, right? And so then we look at what those changeovers were, right? So residential has grown, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more in just a minute, but I think home prices have grown. We've continued to see that. That's reflected in the assessed value. Agriculture has grown because farmland is determined by a state calculation. So the state has a particular calculation they put on the assessed value for farmland. And it is just right now on a trajectory that calculation is continuing to increase. So it's increasing what we call the base rate. Right now it's around $22.50 an acre that farmland is taxed at in terms of that assessed value. And that's expected to continue to grow, and we'll show that here in a second. So why did agricultural grow so much? Is that base rate went from about $1,900 to $22.50. It had a large increase. That calculation is based on what farmland can be rented at and revenue and farms. It's a calculation that's put out by the Purdue Extension Office, and it's a 6-year rolling average. So it's kind of saying what kind of revenue are farms generating, and it's theoretically the more revenue they're generating, the more they can pay in property taxes. You had a decline in your industrial and your personal property. And what we were able to really deduce out of that, looks like it's a couple of parcels within Chrysler parcel. So it looks like one, they closed a little bit of a physical plant, and associated with that is personal property is the equipment inside of it. So any piece of equipment, well, as that piece of property kind of decreased in size, so did that personal property equipment inside. And so that's what really drove those two declines, the change in those parcels this year. So again, sometimes you have those unique pieces within that. Dr. Bates, on the next slide. So we look at this as a visual, right? And so we talk about this piece of pie, so to speak, in terms of your breakout. So again, looking at the chart on the right, you're about 57% residential, the personal property, and the agriculture. This is what we call a diverse tax base, okay? If a district is 70% residential or more, it's not a very diverse base and has a chance to have a lot more circuit breaker impact, will not generate as much dollars in revenue. You've got a nice base, which helps the district overall in terms of your revenue. The piece, we'll talk a little bit here legislatively, I would tell you, as we kind of go into that. This pie now starts to concern me a little bit for two reasons. I don't know how familiar you were, there was what was called the Salter Committee, which is a state and local tax review committee that has been meeting for the last couple of years. They just put out their report. Didn't really tell us a whole lot. What it did tell us is they're looking at a few areas, and when they talk about property tax reform. Two of those that were listed. One was a change in the personal property taxes for businesses. Right now, businesses can depreciate the value of their equipment down to 30%, and then they still have to be taxed on that 30%. They've talked about eliminating that 30%, which would allow them to depreciate that down to 0, which would decrease the assessed value in the district. They've also talked about right now you're exempted actually on personal property up to $80,000. They've talked about moving that exemption up to several $1 million. So I wouldn't even have to report my personal property if it was under $2 or $3 million, which again, would decline that. So when we think about that, what would happen in this situation is that piece of the pie would get smaller, right? But at the end of the day, you still have to generate the same amount of levy or revenue for your school district. So what we talk about is then who pays. Well, if the blue gets smaller, the others have to get larger. And that may cause taxpayers to pay a higher tax bill, to pay a higher liability, depending on what particular class. And so that's one of the things we're watching is what happens with personal property. Same with agriculture. There's talk, what the other recommendation was to make changes to the current farmland calculation. If they were to do that, does that diminish how much assessed value comes from farmland? So if those pieces of the pie get smaller, again, it means the others have to get larger, which could mean tax rates rising. So one of the things we've talked about districts is just being ready to be flexible when it comes to some of the things you maybe have been used to in the past, i.e. tax rate, right? You may have had a pretty steady tax rate. One of the mechanisms that may happen is if that in that situation is it could cause tax rates to rise. And it's nothing you've done differently. You may not change anything in your funding structure, but just the mechanics of it is it would cause tax rates to rise to generate the necessary revenue for the local units. So that's one piece. The other is if they put some sort of cap on this legislatively, it could limit the revenue growth for the school district from what you've been used to. So while this in the past has been a really beneficial, I'd say, kind of tax base, this year could be an interesting piece for it just because you have some heavy reliance in a couple of areas that they're talking about giving relief to. And oh, by the way, they still are also talking about giving relief to all homeowners, right? And so what does that mean if they give relief to homeowners and say homeowners have to bring less to the table, right? I think the worry overall is there's going to be less revenue maybe coming to the table potentially in the future when it comes to your property tax related funds. So I know that's a lot. I know I talked that piece. Is that any questions with that movement? It's a big piece. Your assessed value and how it's made up is a big piece that drives your revenue. So that's what we're going to spend some time to understand that. And what, again, if you hear things legislatively, what that might mean for you as a school district, it could have some potential changes for you.
But they won't change it in 24, or excuse me, 25.
So that question has been raised, right? Because typically any law that's passed is enacted July 1. County assessors are supposed to put out their assessments for the following year, August 1. That doesn't leave a whole lot of time to change. So more than likely, this would not impact the 26 budget. It would more than likely probably start in the 27 budget. But you never know with the state legislators, right? And how quick they may look to make some changes. But more than likely, we're anticipating this starting to impact the 27 budget, given the timeline. So, yep, great question. This is just a historical piece within this in terms of your assessed value broken out in these areas. I want to point something out that kind of is a lead in for the next piece, this whole farmland calculation, because it's changed over time. And if you look on the left-hand side of the chart, the farmland value in the district in 2015 was about 221 million. At that point, they changed the farmland calculation. And you can see, if you look at that green span, how it continued to decline over the next few years because the rate of the farmland calculation declined over those years. Now, as we look from 2022, look how much it's grown back here recently. We're going to show a chart. That's a big swing in terms of this, and that's all driven by this rolling 6-year average, which in a lot of ways is tied to commodity prices and what farms are able to generate in revenue. So it's just an interesting, I think, piece that you're a little bit sensitive to because of the amount of farmland that's made up in the district. The other piece, one of the other pieces we look at is values of homes inside the district. Because again, the value of a home is going to be a part of what the district is able to generate in revenue. So the median home value there the district is in orange, is $161,000 of gross assessed value, right? And our assessment system is what we call market-based. So it's going to correlate with what you start to see in home prices really happening in the market. So this run-up you see to the right-hand side of the chart, if you think of the last few years and what's been happening with home prices across the state, across the country, that's kind of why we're seeing that piece. Home prices have gone up, so they become assessed at a higher level. And that also increases what a homeowner can pay in taxes, because that's the way our system works. The value of my home really determines, again, what I can pay in property taxes. And that's been a little bit of this rub, right? Because it's gone up pretty quickly. And so it's increased what homeowners can pay, or their tax liability would say. So theoretically, right, if I'm the 1%, I can only pay 1%. So in 2022, it says I can only pay roughly $1,200 in property taxes. Now in 2025, it's saying I can pay $1,600 in property taxes. That's a $400 increase in a pretty short order, right? So that's a little bit what's kind of been playing behind the scenes in terms of property taxes. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
I can tell you're getting a little. Sorry about that. I should have given you one.
No, it's okay. I just thought you were just gonna let me die on the vine up here, Dr.
Yeah, no,
Glaze.
that was not my goal. That was not my goal.
So, okay.
So
Yeah.
if Governor-elect Braun gets his way and we return to 2021 tax bills, we provide relief to seniors and lower priced homes. That is a recipe for disaster, according to our numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Across the state.
But that's if they don't change how they provide money to schools, right? I mean, there's got to, like, I'm hearing the word, and no offense, I'm hearing could and may, because we don't know, he's not governor yet, right?
Right.
Could happen, may happen. There's no, like, they haven't done anything yet, right? I mean, I can't, like, Rob, I have the same fear, but they have to know what that's gonna do to the revenue, not just of us, but every school is gonna be desperately
They're
low
gonna
on.
provide
on
universal vouchers, and they're gonna let you compete for the students.
I think
So, I mean, he's not lying about it. It's all out there in the
Yeah.
plan. So, I'm sorry. Go
No,
But
ahead.
he's not an emperor either. There's a
Yeah.
legislature that
it,
could.
Okay.
okay. So here's what I try to be politically correct here a little bit too, right? In open space. Here's what I piece. Yes, Governor Braun has put out a plan. I think there is some real concern on how that plan actually plays out in reality, not just by people running the analysis, but also by legislators at this piece. I'm not sure how on board legislators are with his plan. But at the end of the day, I still think there's going to be some sort of property tax reform. The question is, if they limit revenue, do they allow schools, like other government units, something like a local income tax to replace some of that revenue? That has been floated around. Chairman Thompson, Representative Thompson, who's chairman of House Ways and Means, has floated that in previous years. The Salter Committee threw out that there is supposedly $4 billion in local income tax revenue the state is not tapping into. So does this become a shift as part of their plan that, okay, we're going to lower property taxes because we get a win, but we're going to provide some that revenue, through a local income tax? I think the thing also to remember is this just doesn't impact schools. This impacts cities, towns, police, fire, all of those kind of agencies. So I think you're going to see a coalition that's going to push back a little bit. But I hate, now I'm saying like, oh, we're going to figure this out, right? I'm still worried too. I mean, I think there's a definite reason to be worried about what the revenues may look like after this. And I think having this conversation proactively and starting to prepare for it is an important step. So I'm trying to find out what they're doing behind the side so I can go out and sell it and, steal it and sell it, that piece, right? And have the answers, right? No, I'm kidding. Okay, so one of the other pieces we help the districts start to understand is what's your assessed value look like in the future? Because again, as assessed value grows, it has impact on your tax rates. It has impact on your capacity in terms of maybe debt service, on your revenues. So as your assessed value goes, so does really your dollars at the end of the day. So what's it going to look like, right? Well, one of the things that we look at are home values and home prices and what homes are selling for. So this is a chart for Tipton County. It's not localized to the school district, but it gives us a somewhat localized data set. And what we're looking at is to say, okay, what have home prices done over the last few years in terms of change? So this is a median sales price year over year. So if you can see from 20 to 21, they went up by almost 16%, 21 to 22, almost 9%. Now we've seen a little bit of a lull in 23. It dropped down a little bit. The interesting part, so part of that 21, 22 is what's driven some of the assessed value growth the last couple of years. Home prices are up, and so your assessed value's going up. This is a data point we use to start to project, because the way our assessed value system works is sales activity in 2024 is assessed in 2025 and will be a part of your 26 budget. So when we see a 14% change countywide in sales price, what we're seeing is, and we're seeing this across the state, we thought for sure home prices were going to start to plateau, right? They skyrocketed. They moved up mortgage or interest rates, in the 7 and 8%. It was going to plateau home prices. It just hasn't done it yet. So our trending analysis in the residential sector is that we're continuing to see growth in home prices, which is growth in assessed value. So that's a positive piece for the district. And this is just a data point that starts to speak to that a little bit.
So the 24 real estate affects the 25 assessed value, which affects the 26 budget. Is that what you said? Okay.
Yep. A 2-year lag on those
Yeah.
pieces, so that way it works. Yep. Please. The other piece, obviously, for the district that we look at is the farmland calculation. And this is that farmland calculation. And kind of break this down again. So in 2025, we're sitting at the 2280. You can see the growth the last couple of years. This has been also a key contributor in the district's assessed value growth because the farmland calculation has gone up and you have a large component of your AV that is farmland. And you can see where it looks like it's going to continue to go, which is just a continued climb over the next few years. I bring this up because when I came into the school finance world, it was 2015. And that incline you see on the left-hand side of the chart from 2012 to 2015, that got Farm Bureau activated enough that they changed the farmland calculation because it was increasing too quickly. And they made a change. Now look at the timeline on the right and how fast it's increasing. Farm Bureau is actively lobbying to change the calculation, to make some modifications. Again, what that looks like, I don't know. Their argument in this piece, which can understand, is it's not a timely calculation because a lot of the run-up in commodity prices happened 3 or 4 years ago, are captured in this, and now commodity prices haven't gone down. So my revenue is going down, but my taxes are going up. So it's not a timely system that interacts with those pieces. And I think there's some pieces there that'll be considered by the legislative body within that. But I think the reason we bring this up is it makes us worried to project that the district's going to continue to see farmland grow at this level. Because I just think they're going to come in and probably make some modifications to how that looks within that. And so we'll talk about how we're factoring that in here in just a second. So a lot of numbers here. This is assessed value, the change in assessed value on an annual basis for the school district. So the blue lines are your historic changes. The orange are some of our projections for moving forward, and we'll talk about the other colors here a little bit in between. So the teal 12.6 was the 2025. So the district's assessed value grew by 12.6% for the 25 budget, driven by home price, farmland, really driving those pieces, right? If you go back and you think back to those charts that I showed you a little bit ago, we saw the run up in 23. Well, we saw the change in home prices in 21 and in 22, right? The purplish bar is a legislative change that happened. Okay, so in 2023, they passed House Bill 1499. And what it did is change the supplemental deduction on a home. So if you've ever looked at your home, you get a 35% supplemental deduction, reducing what you pay in taxes, right? So they changed that in 2024, they increased that deduction to 40% to give homeowners relief. Okay? And the way the legislation was written is in 2024, it was 40%, and then they would reduce back to 37.5% in 25, and then back to the original 35% in calendar year 26. So a little bit of a roller coaster. What did it do? Well, if you look at the 2024, the district grew by 7.7% in assessed value that year. What our numbers would say is if they had not passed that bill, you actually would have grown by 10.7%. It took assessed value from the homeowner sector and pulled it off to the side with that extra deduction. Right? Now, it wasn't lost because now if you look at 2025, you grew by 12.6, and we're saying if they had not passed that, you would have only grown by 11.1. What's that difference? It's that 3% almost cut in half coming back on. And then when you look at 2026, you can see we're projecting to grow by 7.1% instead of 5.7. It's that last roll off of House Bill 1499. So that's created a little bit of a roller coaster, but it also gives us a little insight. If they give some homeowner deductions, what might it mean for assessed value? It could put a drag a little bit on some of your assessed value growth as well, depending on what they do. Moving forward in the future, again, the next couple of years, we still show some decent growth. You can see in the 5.8 and 3.5. The reason it drops so low in 2030 and 2031 is if you go back to the farmland calculation, that's a year it actually comes down. And when that comes down, it creates a drag on your assessed value, and your assessed value growth isn't as strong. So all these things are kind of working kind of interconnectedly. Dr. Lacy, if you want to next. So the other piece that we wanted to do for the school district was to give a sense of what would a conservative AV look like, growth look like. Because you are very heavy agriculture and you're very heavy personal property, and those are two things that they're considering. What would it look like if we gave a little bit of a conservative growth model? And that's what the green represents. In that model, it's a very simple piece. We just took the 2025 farmland value of 2250 and just held it constant. We didn't allow it to grow like the chart says it's going to. We held it constant. So you can see the difference there in those years as it is a lower growth. It does create drag on the assessed value if they change that farmland calculation. It could be further if they change the business personal property, right, within those pieces. So again, we're in this weird world, right, where we don't know what's going to happen, that you could have some really strong AV growth, or they could really pull back on those pieces. And that can have some impact, obviously, on your debt capacity or what you're trying to do with some of your tax rates and those pieces. Because, let me get in the weeds just for a second, tax rate specific. You have an operations fund tax rate that makes up part of that 91 cents, right? If you look at that 4% line and you go follow that white line across, the math, the way the system works with the operations fund tax rate is as if assessed value is above that 4%, because that's where currently what we call the maximum growth quotient is. If it's above 4%, your operations rate goes down. You don't do anything. It's just the function of the system, because you're only allowed to grow your operations fund revenue by 4%. So if AV comes in higher than that, your rate goes down. If it comes in at the 3.2% or the 2% less than that MLGQ line, your rate goes up. And there's nothing you're doing with that, right? That's just a function of however assessed value comes in, moves that operations fund rate up and down. So as you think about, whether the district chooses to manage to a total tax rate or the tax rate sensitivity, right? You don't control that operations fund rate. It moves up and down as a function of where assessed value comes in. There's a lot of layers to that. We'll show it a little bit, I think, here in just a minute. But it is, I think, if you're thinking around tax rate, it's an important component to understand. All right, so a lot of numbers here in this piece, but this is a big part of the analysis. So what we attempt to help the district do is understand what happens to your tax rates, what happens to your revenue, if you pick a couple of different scenarios around your debt service fund. And two that we're going to cover tonight. And we can always run additional scenarios for the district. It's part of the work we do. One of those, what we call here, is a fixed debt service levy. So your levy is your revenue, right? So if you look at that very top line under certified levy and you notice the debt service number, it stays exactly the same from 2024 on. Doesn't change, right? Because we're keeping that constant. Okay? What happens when you do that, as assessed value grows, if you look at the bottom of the page, your overall tax rate goes down. All right, so it's going to go from, in this case, we'll go from 90 cents to 82 to 78. We'll continue to decrease. So that can be a positive for the district. Couple of, I think, school finance thoughts to think about when you talk about a levy scenario. If I keep the levy the same, right, that is how much I can pay in really in bond payments on an annual basis, right? So it determines the capacity of my bonds. When that number stays flat, so does my ability, the amount of dollars I can issue in bond total. So if I am able to issue $10 million now, that's how much I can make in payments in order to do those $10 million. The long range part of that is as construction costs go up and projects cost more and more to do, which they've almost doubled in cost over the last 4 years. Steel is up about 68%. Asphalt's up about 94% over the last 4 years, right? So as those costs go up, that 3286 becomes worth less and less because it doesn't get you any additional really dollars in that piece. So that's one of the drawbacks a little bit of a levy-based piece is you can sometimes get behind in terms of maintaining your buildings depending on where you're at. So it's a consideration to have. The positive is it lowers your tax rate. Right? As you keep that system, it does bring your tax rate down. I think the thing to consider within that is if you go back to one of those original charts, some of those residents in your taxing districts that have the $3 rates or higher may not feel a difference as you lower your rate. They may not see a difference in your tax bill. All that will happen is that revenue that you give up may go to the other local units. So to the town, to the county, and to some of those other areas. It doesn't go to the homeowner.
I have a problem with that argument. May. So you're saying if our rate goes lower, the mayor's gonna see that and borrow more money for the police department.
That's correct.
It's not the same money. This has been confusing among the board.
Okay.
Our debt service rate and our debt service money is completely unrelated to any other entity in this town. Completely. They are not tied together. Only in theory, where they would see our rate go down and they would take advantage of it. But they are not tied together, correct?
They are tied together.
In what way?
So property tax revenue as a whole, there's a property tax capacity that's out there. That again, when homeowners are taxed, right? They're
But
going to,
our 39 cents per $100 has no effect on that.
it does. So can I walk through this piece?
But not automatically. It doesn't mean that we go to 35 cents and their rate goes up.
And that say their rate may not change. Their revenue, their circuit breaker will change. So
But whether they borrow money and increase their rate or not is completely unrelated to whether or not we borrow money.
well, those are two different pieces.
Right.
Okay, so them choosing to take out bond issues or you choosing to take out bond issues is right. Those are unrelated.
That's what I'm talking about.
Those are administrative decisions.
That's what I'm talking
Okay.
about. Those are
But
completely
your
unrelated.
decisions around the rate and their decisions around the rate impact each other. For example, if the town were choose to raise their tax rate by 10 cents, the circuit breaker line that you see, the circuit breaker loss there in that line, that calculation, would go up for the school district and you would collect less dollars.
You being the taxpayer? Or
You being, sorry, the school district. Sorry, I
The
pointed at you. I
school.
apologize.
Yeah.
The school
School.
district for that
Okay.
piece. The school district would collect less revenue. Yep. So if the town or the county or any other unit increases their tax rate, specifically like in the Tipton area, right, where we have a $3 rate, right? If they increase their rate, it's going to increase the circuit breaker loss for all units, which means the net levy or the revenue that the school district would collect at the end of the day would be less. The same for the town or the county. If you raise your rate, it would cause them to collect less dollars potentially in those funds because of additional circuit breaker that happens. So that is how you are interrelated. Now you go out to a township where a homeowner is not at the property tax cap, then yes, then there's not the interconnection within that piece. But that's where you have the uniqueness, where you have these $3 rates and you have homeowners at the cap. The way it works, right? If I can only pay $1,600 and I'm at the cap and I'm paying $1,600, that $1,600 is then broken out proportionally by the tax rates of each of those units. So if the school is 25% of the overall rate, you're going to get 25% of those $1,600, right? If you raise your rate that you become 50% of the overall rate, you're now going to get 50% of the dollars. But there's still only $1,600. So if you get now 800 instead of 400, it means everyone else gets less. That's how you're interconnected when it comes to the property tax world.
So if we raised our rate, that would cause more circuit breaker dollars to be lost.
For both the school district and the other government units in Tipton, in some of these areas. If you go to the township,
So we could raise the rate and not actually generate the money, the revenue that we would think we would generate because of the
Correct.
circuit breaker.
and I apologize, there's a chart, and Dr. Glaze, I'll share this with you. We do a chart, and I didn't put it in here tonight, but I can share it with the district. So there's a calculation that we do, and then what it says is for every dollar that you raise in your debt service levy, how much do you actually keep? And so it might be 60 cents, right? And the reason for that is you're going to create additional circuit breaker on the school district, so you're going to have to give up 40 cents. And then what we also look at is that dollar comes from both the school district, it may come from taxpayers, and it may come from the other units because they have additional circuit breaker as well.
Thank you for explaining it that way, because that is not how we understood it, right, Jen? From 2 years ago?
And I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little lost here. You wanna get a phone call back?
You're fine. I love talking about this stuff, so
I mean,
please.
I just heard it. I mean, we've had it explained probably 2 or 3 times. Well, at least I have it for you.
Yeah.
And my first was the initial, what you just said. Yeah. We've heard it.
This is why school finance and local finance is really complicated, these pieces, right? Because, again, if we went back to that original chart with the different tax rates, depending on which township or which tax unit, we have a different scenario. Because again, if a homeowner is not at the tax caps, like in one of those townships, we're not talking about the sharing of revenue like we are inside of Tipton.
So if
Because
their rate increase, would it generate more revenue for,
for everybody.
within the township, not within, like, obviously, for my tax, you know.
So when the city issues $2.6 million for a baseball field, and then they issue a statutory park board to raise money for park enhancements, all those rates drive up. We get less money coming into the school, correct?
That's correct. You
So
see it,
essentially, they are dictating less money flowing to the school that way.
correct.
Thank you.
So why aren't we at the same table with the commissioners and the mayor?
Because the way Indiana currently works is each unit is allowed to set their own rates.
Just like the library set their own rates.
You as the board choose to set the scores. Again, you could choose to raise your debt service rate by $1 and cause lots of impact on some of the other units within those pieces. There's nothing that really stops, within there. I mean, there's obviously some legal steps in terms of, you guys are familiar with, when you do projects, right? You have to have some of those pieces. So I don't say there's not any piece within that. But from a tax standpoint, it's really driven by each individual unit.
To my point, though, they can continue to borrow money, and we can continue to borrow money. But because of the circuit breaker, none of us are gonna get the revenue we think we're gonna get, because we've just borrowed too much money, right?
I live
Or-
in Cicero Township. I'm fine. Did you see that? I'm a mile away from the circuit breaker. All you want. It's you guys out there on Green Street and stuff. Doesn't bother me. You can double it. I got loads of room on the chart, so I don't care.
That's why we're elected from different districts, right?
I represent 42% of the tax base and we aren't at the cap, so it's really just screwing you guys over. So it's okay.
Let me clarify, you're still going to, this again, the new piece, right? If you raise your rate and they raise their rate, you're still going to get the money you need in the debt service fund to make those bond payments.
It's the operations.
You're gonna lose money in the operations fund.
Yep.
So that's the push-pull within this piece, right? And that's the piece of, you're still going to get those monies for your bonds, because they make sure you pay your bonds first. But you're gonna take the hit in the operations fund within that, and that's the catch. And again, that's, when other units raise their rates, they have impact on you potentially in some of these
Exactly right.
particular areas, in terms of your circuit breaker. So, I mean, we make assumptions, just to make, kind of also ties to, when we do this analysis for you as a school district, and we say, here's where we project your circuit breaker to be, we make assumptions about the other taxing units because they have impact on that calculation. We typically hold their rates steady, not making assumptions they're gonna raise or lower them. They're gonna follow the natural flow of the assessed value system, because they impact these figures at the end of the day if they move one way or the other.
I throw another wrench in.
You sure can.
Okay, so, what
Come
if,
out, man, this was fun.
I know.
so, what if, someone wants to set up a TIF? Yeah,
So,
yeah,
tips are an interesting piece, right?
yeah.
Um,
They don't help anyone
no.
particularly.
So let me start here.
Not the government entity.
No.
Everyone knows what a TIF is. We're familiar with the term TIF, tax and increments financing, and that piece, right? So we're gonna carve out a particular piece of area, and we're going to begin to capture the assessed value. First and foremost, I will tell you, we at Policy Analytics, because we represent schools, cities, and towns, both sides, we often talk about a but-for test. And what that means is, would the development have happened if they had not TIFed that area? Because the idea behind a TIF is I TIF that area, I'm going to redevelop, I'm going to put infrastructure in to try to drive business development and create new revenue coming in. So the question is, would it have happened had they not TIFed? If it would have happened organically, then a TIF's not a good idea. But if it's a space where you don't have any commercial development and you're trying to generate it, it can be a source of that. We've seen great examples. If you've ever, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, we live in the town of Speedway, about a mile from the track. There's a main street in Speedway that was barren and deserted for my first 10 years living in the community. They TIFed it, they redid the infrastructure, and if you go down there, it's got about 10 new restaurants, it's a thriving place. That probably would not have happened had not TIFed. The infrastructure was so old, right? So there are positives. There are also negatives at times when TIFs are misused.
Didn't the legislature change? Didn't the school board used to have the power to reject TIFs?
Residential tips.
Residential TIFs,
Residential tips.
yes.
And
Commercial,
That power has been taken
On,
away?
on the TIF topic, I want to go back real quick because
Okay.
I haven't lived here as long as these folks. The Chrysler building that's now closed and hopefully reopening, is that in a TIF?
Mhm.
It is in a TIF.
Chrysler TIF.
So
Yeah.
that's affecting, I mean,
it does, so it's this interesting piece, right? So years ago, when they established the TIF, they set a base assessed value. So let's say that land was worth $100,000, right? You were collecting tax on that $100,000. It's TIF for the next 20 to 25 years, right? You, as that assessed value grows, you don't, as a school district, get to collect any of that growth. You still get the $100,000. When it expires, even if they establish a new TIF, the base is reset to whatever that value is. So it's a long-range piece that eventually you do see the assessed value inside that TIF. It's just over a long period of time. So they tend to be a little bit of a controversial topic.
The residential tip, the money flows very quickly to the schools. The commercial tips, not so much because they spend 20 years paying off the
Say
infrastructure.
the first part about the residential.
Residential, so our tips, right? The houses get up, the assessed value starts, they're collecting taxes, infrastructure's paid for, and the school receives their portion of the TIF in under 20 years.
Get any.
Depends on how.
Not necessarily.
No.
Depends on how the redevelopment commission handles the TIF, because technically,
Okay.
those dollars would be captured inside those TIFs for the 20 years. So school districts have typically, most cases, been opposed to residential TIFs because it creates new homes, which typically brings new students, which requires additional services, but you don't get the property tax revenue from those homes because it's captured inside the TIF, right? Now, some communities have looked at it and some school boards have gotten kind of in line with it because they don't have housing and they're trying to develop housing, right? That was the original intent. Senator Rotz from Richmond passed the residential TIF bill. It was because they were having trouble for a hospital, employees couldn't find homes over in the Richmond area. So that was kind of the genesis of it. School boards used to have a vote. They could approve or deny that. That has been taken away. That's technically supposed to sunset in 27.
27.
We'll see, what they sunset that or not, but that's been, I would say, districts can sometimes get a little bit more on board with commercial TIFs because, again, if it's generating development in an area that wouldn't have had it, it might be good for the overall community. Residential TIFs are sometimes a little tougher to get on board with because of providing services without the revenue. Right. So, yeah, great questions within this. I think the last slide I have is the other scenario that we run within this piece is then the debt service, holding the debt service rate steady. Okay, so now I'm going to start at the bottom of the chart, and if you look at the rates, we're keeping the debt service rate at the 41.77 and holding that steady. The operations fund rate in this scenario is going down because AV is higher than the 4% MLGQ, so that drives the operations rate down. So overall, the tax rate's going down, right? When you look up then to the levy at the top, you can see the increasing certified levy for the debt service fund, creating additional dollars in revenue in the debt service fund. Okay, so now again, if we go back to some big picture school finance kind of topics, why do some districts choose to do a constant debt service rate, right? Well, it's because they know they're going to have additional projects coming and they need to have some capacity to fund those. Construction costs are going up. And if I keep my levy steady, I have a more difficult time being able to maybe do those projects and to take care of the district in the way that I need. There's a stat that's out there by the American Physical Plant Association, long word, APA they go by. They are a facilities group around K-12 and higher ed. They recommend a K-12 district spend 2% of your building values back in ongoing maintenance on an annual basis. So one of the easy ways we would always do that was find our insurance value because it's typically conservative, right? Because we don't want to pay too high on premiums. But whatever that was, take 2%. That gives us a rough number of what we should be doing in projects every year. Now, whether you do 2 million every other year, something like that, right? But the whole idea is if I don't reinvest in my buildings, just like if I don't upkeep my home, I'm going to start to have wear and tear, and all of a sudden that number becomes really large, right? And we have some districts right now that we work with that have seen have been forced to do some very high debt service rate increases because they've had to replace $10 million in HVAC systems and major projects because they weren't taking care of them on an ongoing basis, right? So I'm not trying to be a proponent one way or the other for these strategies. I'm just trying to talk kind of high-level school finance pieces. That's why school districts would often look at a fixed debt rate. Kind of back to our overall conversation, right, about this interconnectedness of the rate and the circuit breaker is, again, some districts choose not to let their rate fall because if I let my rate fall, like in the Tipton area, I'm not helping my homeowner. I'm just helping the other units of government. So that was a strategy, honestly, we had in one of the districts I worked with, 90% of our homeowners were at the tax. I could have lowered my debt service rate by 30 cents and none of them would have seen a difference. So it just would have went to the county, to the city of Indianapolis and those places. We said, we need to invest in our buildings. We need to invest in our district. So we chose to do a rate management piece so we could continue to invest in those areas. So again, theoretical pieces for the board to consider and talk with Dr. Glaze, but we wanted to provide at least those two to give you some sense. It really doesn't have an impact one way or the other on circuit breaker. That's one of the other things we look at, because sometimes if you keep your debt service rate higher, you might see some additional circuit breaker. You don't see a whole lot of it here right now in the analysis. So
I have a question.
please.
How do you make the rate fixed? Because I thought the rate was dependent on the payments we had. So can we fix it and then put extra money in our debt service account? Or make
Yeah.
extra payments on the bonds we have? How do you fix the rate? I thought it fluctuated based on what you owe this year.
Awesome question. So two kind of ways to do that. Is one, honestly, is working with your financial advisor. I think you guys work with Baker Tilly, I believe that piece, right? To plan out over multiple years, because then what they work to do is to structure your payments. So you can do a bond issue either maybe not every year, but every other year, and they structure it so the payments keep that rate flat. So that's one way, is the way you structure your payments. The other way you kind of fill in the gap is there's a line in the budget called operating balance. You're allowed to keep up to, depends on the bond, but 50 to 15% of the payment you can keep in cash. So that's a way districts will sometimes just maneuver that and keep a little more cash for the following year. It's all part of the state guidelines, it's all appropriate to then fine tune to keep that number until the next year when the debt falls off or they have some additional AV and they can do another bond issue. So those are really the two ways that Dr. Glaze, it would work with your financial advisor to try to manage that rate.
And that cash you just talked about can only be used for the debt
That's
service?
right.
Okay.
That's right.
And
It's
that's our-
calculated as a part of your next year's budget.
Now, I know I've asked Dr. Glaze, this is not a gotcha. I want to hear him answer this question too. We can't make extra payments. If we owe $3.2 million, but keeping our rate steady brings in 3.5 million, can we pay $300,000 towards our debt?
So your rate is going to be set based upon
What you owe.
your payments for that year and then what you're keeping in cash. That's the way it's kind of structured.
So you'd have to up what you're going to keep in cash in
That's right.
order to
Yeah.
keep that money.
And could you, if you had enough cash, I think one time in my career, and gosh, this is a legal question. I think we used some to pay off a little bit of a bond at one point. So if you had extra cash, but in a given year, it's your payments plus what you're keeping in cash. And you can't build up a whole lot, because what they take for next year's budget is they say, okay, you have all this in cash, you can use that to make some of your payments. So
Yeah.
they count that as a part of your payments for the following year. So it's really hard to build up a whole lot of cash in the debt service fund to do things like that.
Okay.
So.
So learning that schools do money different.
That's for sure. Yeah. So, I think that was my last slide, Dr.
Yeah.
Glaze, within
Yep,
this
that's
pieces.
it.
So,
Yeah.
any questions or anything that I can answer? Well, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
the
no, that was super
dialogue. And
helpful. Thank
if
you
anything
so
comes
much.
up, do this, please let me know. And,
Yeah,
and
of
I'll,
course.
I'll get you that slide. I said, we got it's called the marginal chart slide in terms of for every dollar you raise, where's it kind of go. I'll get that to you and you can
Awesome.
share that out. So,
Yeah, any questions you have, I mean, Barry's quick. I mean, he responds very quickly, so, he, let me know and we'll send those to him, and he's, like I said, he's pretty quick and has a lot of good information. So,
Thank you so much for coming in.
yes, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Real quick, did anybody have any questions about the board agenda?
Where's Andrea?
She's coming.
Oh, okay.
She's coming.
I thought she was going to be.
Yeah, I don't think we have any comments from the community, so at this time, we'll adjourn the work session and begin our regular school board meeting in about 1 minute.
There she is.
Welcome to the Tipton Community School Corporation regular school board meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This evening, we'll begin with our Pledge of Allegiance, and we will recite our vision statement led by Eric Underwood.
I pledge allegiance.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Growing empowered.
future-ready students who are prepared for a lifetime of opportunity and success.
Okay, thank you. Tonight, we have the exciting opportunity to appoint a new school board member. The board received 3 applications for the vacant school board seat and interviewed 3 applicants in an open meeting on Monday, December 2nd, 2024. The board would like to thank all the applicants for their time and consideration to serve on this role. The board would like to recommend Kimberly Faig for appointment to the school board for the remaining term of Amber Rodabaugh, ending December 31st, 2024. Do we have a motion and a second to approve the new board member?
Move to appoint new board member.
Second it.
Does anyone have any comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so at this time then, we would invite Julia, I'm sorry, Julia, I'm not going to say your last name. Kozicki, thank you, from Church Hiddle and Atrium. She's going to administer the oath of office to Kimberly Faig. Please join us in the front.
Join us me at the podium. Turn it on, of course. All right. Well, you'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the State of Indiana, and the laws of the United States and the State of Indiana. I will faithfully execute the duties of my office as a member of this governing body. So help me God. Congratulations.
You get to sit back there with me.
Welcome aboard.
Okay, at this time in our board meeting, we like to take an opportunity to have the board talk a little bit about, tell me something good that you've seen in our community or in our school system since we last met.
I will tell you, we were at the Christmas concert last night between the middle school and high school. And the very end of the concert was the combined choir. I've lived here 10 years. I don't think I've ever seen that many students in our combined choir. It was very encouraging to see Ms. Wallen and Jenny and all the people that are contributing to that and see those numbers grow. So it was, I had the songs in my head all day, which I didn't appreciate, but it was fantastic to see that many middle school and high school choir kids. So I just thought that was great last night.
I would just like to say I had one of my first opportunities to be in the Inferno with the men's basketball or boys basketball on over the weekend, and just to see all the displays up, the community participation, so many of the sponsors. It was just such a neat, incredible night. I've heard even my own kids say, wow, it's so cool to be able to play in such a neat looking place, but just to see the community rally around was just a fun kind of electric night. Okay, then at this time, we'll move on to, I don't believe we had any comments from the community. So we will approve the consent agenda items. Tonight on the agenda, we have, on the consent agenda, sorry, we have approval of the agenda, approval of minutes from the work session of, and the regular session from November 12th, and the special session on December 2nd. Approval of claims for payroll from November 15th, November 22nd, and December 6th. The approval of the personnel report from, for December 2024. We do not have any field trips to approve, and in your packet included all of the donations from September 1st to November 30th. So I need a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Are there any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The personnel report for December 10th, 2024. We did not have any for the certified staff. For classified staff, we have the resignation of Cindy McLeay as a cafeteria employee at the high school, Alyssa Phillips as the special education paraeducator at the elementary school. By way of recommendation for classified staff, we have Lily Heaton and Nikki Perez, both as special education paraeducators at the elementary school, and Heather Goodnight as a cafeteria employee at the elementary school. Under ECA staff, we have the resignations of Tony Richard and Deidre Money as track coaches at the high school. Boyce Nichols resigned as the varsity girls soccer coach at the high school. Nate Slack resigned as the freshman basketball coach at the high school. Matthew Riley resigned as the 6th grade boys basketball coach at the middle school. We have recommendations for Ryan Burgum as the 6th grade boys basketball coach at the middle school, Corbin Nelson as the assistant swim coach at the high school, and Mylan Swan as the boys freshman basketball coach at the high school. And then as a volunteer for ECA staff, Matt Quigley as the boys basketball volunteer at the high school. Okay, at this time, we'll move into the superintendent report.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to I didn't really do a PowerPoint this time because I just thought I would just kind of talk about a couple of things. Mr. Jaworski and I had the great privilege of judging door contests in the elementary, and it was very intense, I have to say. The effort put into these doors was just pretty unbelievable. Even like, we started probably about 3:15, and there were still people out getting the last touch on their door. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. Some really hard work went into that, and we certainly appreciate the fun things that happen this time of year. And the one thing that I love as well, each one of our buildings is decked out for the holidays, and it's just nice to be in a place where we can kind of deck things out and celebrate the season. So it's always fun. I did want to take the opportunity to thank the Campbell Family Foundation. They've told us that they are willing to help us with our playground project through a matching grant. And again, I just want to thank them for their generosity and what they're willing to do for our schools. And we're looking forward to that. The playground project is going to be delayed a little bit. Probably looking at a summer of 26 to give us some opportunity to raise some money in order to, as I hear all the time, do it right, which is what we want to do. And so I'm very excited about that. And again, I want to thank the Campbell family for doing that. Along the lines of our new and improved Inferno, I did want to thank John Robertson for the digital display boards and all of his work that he's doing with those digital display boards. I think they're adding to the game. I think there's a lot more that we can do, but I appreciate all the time that he's taken to write the programs and to really try to do some innovative things with those displays. And I just wanted to make sure that we said something about him in today's meeting. So future meetings, January is always a very interesting meeting. It's a long meeting, so I will apologize in advance. We always do a summary of transfers. Brooke will talk about that, and that's something you're going to approve a little bit later here in the meeting. And she'll talk about how we had to move in order to make sure all of our that we have no negative balances anywhere. And then we have a Board of Finance meeting. We also set the mileage rate. We have a financial report, and then we have our annual DUAB report. And again, this is the distressed district report. We are not a distressed district, but we still have to go through the report and tell everybody that we're not a distressed district. So that's an annual report that we do. We also have board reorganization, conflict of interest statement, and then there will be an appointment of a new Tipton Library Board there'll be a new appointee for that. So that will happen also in January. And then we also permission to advertise geo bonds if we decide to go that direction. In February, we are going to share our survey data in February. We have a lot of data in, just have to kind of sort through it and present that out to everybody. And then we also will avoid outstanding checks. And then, as always, we're starting to look toward the spring, and we'll ask for permission to advertise for bids for our spraying and trimming. And that's a 2-year contract that we will award, most likely in the March meeting or maybe even the February meeting, depending on if we get everything ready to roll. So that's all I got.
I have a question.
Yes,
Who is John Robertson?
he is an English teacher at the high school.
Okay.
And John is, he also does our publications class. So our publications class has kind of taken over some of our digital display work that we're doing. And so John's a graduate of Tipton and an all-around great guy. So,
If you'd come to the brand marketing meeting
yeah, there you go.
that you were invited to.
Sorry about that.
You could have spent a couple of hours with them, like
That's right.
Dr. Glaze.
That's right.
Little joke.
Yep, yep.
Tammy was
yep,
invited,
yep.
but wasn't supposed to be there.
I know.
She showed up.
Yes, and I appreciate that, and I am so sorry about that. Okay, but anyway, yeah, that's who John is. So
Okay,
good
thank
guy.
you.
Yeah.
Okay. Next, we'll move into our Blue Future Awards.
Yeah, neither Susan or Amber could be here tonight, but I did want to take the opportunity to say something about them. The 4 ladies joined the board when I was first hired, and I just wanted to kind of reflect on really how far we've come. And what all we've done. It's been pretty amazing. And just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Susan Sloan and Amber Rodeball for contributing to all of that work. And I'm thrilled that the 2 of you are still hanging on. And I think that it just, again, I just appreciate the fact that you had a very green superintendent who was trying to figure it out. And you were all very nice to me as I was trying to figure it out. So I appreciate that. Thank you. We will have our elementary come up.
So the first person that the elementary school would like to recognize is Sherry Collins. So he would join me. Sherry has worked at Tipton Community Schools for 38 years. So we are very appreciative of her knowledge. She's held many positions, but she currently teaches 4th grade. And she was one of our November Shining staff members. And she is always putting students first. Each year, Mrs. Cottingham has students in her class complete an essay for the Indiana Statehood Essay Contest. And students in her class have been selected to be finalists each of the 3 years, the last 3 years. And we just want to recognize her for her hard work and her dedication at Tipton Elementary. So this is for you. And then we would also like to recognize her student. So Miss Emery, would you join us? This is Emery Freeman, and she deserves the Blue Future Award for being named as one of the finalists in the Indiana State Code Essay Contest. And Emery is a student who puts forth 100% effort into everything she does in and out of the classroom. And she's a hard worker, and she's just an all-around wonderful kid.
Congratulations.
Get our picture taken. Is that okay? Thank you both. I wanted to present an award, the Blue Future Award to Nathan Shaddy. Come up.
Shaddy has been volunteering at the school for 14 years. And she volunteers every day. She creates all the prep materials for the teachers, copying, laminating, and goes above and beyond whatever teachers need. I don't know if you recognize me, but I see you every other Friday in the hallway. I come in for the mentoring program in elementary, and she is there at 8 a.m. greeting all the kids with open arms and a smile. And as a non-hugger, the way she makes me feel, and I can only imagine the way she makes the little kids feel every day. So if you can turn a non-hugger into a hugger, I think you're doing a great job. So we just appreciate all that you do, and what a positive influence you're on this kids every morning, and I'm sure you just help make the further day productive. Oh, you
Oh,
do.
my
You make
gosh.
me have a great day every other Friday.
That's right.
Oh, thank you so much to our award recipients. At this time, I would like to say if you received an award tonight, do not feel like you need to stay for the rest of our meeting. If you would like to leave and head out, don't be embarrassed. Feel free.
We're gonna miss the financial
So,
report.
okay. Next on our agenda is our spotlight on schools with Mr. Jaworski.
I'm trying to
Deep breath.
relinquish it.
Deep breath.
I don't know if we're gonna be able to share this, but I can send you the presentation.
Well, for some reason, it's not letting me close it out. I don't-
Turn it back on. Isn't that a 15 thing?
Yep.
I don't know why it won't disconnect. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Does that make any sense? to me?
No.
I don't
She's
know
done
what the
so
heck
by
it's
so.
doing.
It won't load because it's too many numbers.
At the time she was there were two of them, but I think one of them either moved to the middle school or
Now,
something,
right?
but yeah.
I know your presentations, charts and colors and.
Hey, Kyle,
You want to see
I'm
that?
having a little trouble relinquishing the screen. Any secrets? I can just shut it off. I know you guys frown on that, but okay. Yeah, I've got it up there, but it just won't stop. Absolutely. Okay, awesome. Thank you. You're magical. Thank you. All right. Very good. I'm just gonna shut it down. Okay, go.
Your screen is being observed.
Well, what I could do is I've shared this with you guys already in my notes.
Sorry.
Unfortunately, the community won't see it live. I can make sure this is available for everybody. Anyways, let me just jump to it. So, my presentation tonight is simply just calendar considerations. So again, we've got we've been doing a little bit of, oh, look, there it is. We've been doing a little bit of collection this year on attendance, as you are probably well aware at this point. Just kind of, the state's done a really good job of doing a great job of sharing data, not just for us, but also for all districts across the state, so we can kind of see where we fall among others. I'm not going to get into that so much tonight as I am just looking at our own data. So just a few notes. What I'm about to share with you is just a review of the last 4 school years, 21 to 25, just the first semester. A quick explanation, once again, on excuses, unexcused absences, and how we're kind of monitoring that. Essentially, excuse is anytime we have a documented evidence that we know where a student is at, whether they're homesick or the family had to take them out for something, like we know that kid is safe and well. The unexcused is when there are no call, no shows, and then it's the job of our administration to kind of track down where are your kids, why are they not here, just, communication wise. So that's gonna give a little bit of explanation as to what I talked about on saying excuse versus unexcused. Our focus on this kind of data analysis is on attendance during fall break and Thanksgiving week. Those are 2 weeks that we have just 2 days of attendance, Monday and Tuesday on each of those. And we wanted to compare that to the average weekly absence rate. So how does school attendance for students go, on those short weeks compared to a regular school week? Before I get too far into that, I do want to just bring this up because when I was going through this, I noted, wow, 2021, 2022, what's happening there? This is a comparison of, if you can see the scale is the same, of 2021, 2022 school year to this school year for first semester. That's a huge difference. So we have come a long way since, that just, COVID, post-COVID times. And all of the last 3 years are pretty similar to what we have on the 24, 25 years. So again, perspective, all right? Perspective and context on what we're saying, like good and bad attendance. It's nothing like what we saw in those couple years of COVID. So again, just want to keep that in mind as we look at the rest of these graphs. Again, these are kind of—
Does that include, when you say like COVID years, does that include when we would have to quarantine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's what this. So a lot of these, like when you have upwards of 1 week, 40% of your students absent. Yeah, that's pretty dramatic, especially early in that school year. So when I look at this again, I know the graphs jump up. I changed the scale on these so you can actually see the jumps a little bit easier than you could with that outlier year. So to put these in perspective, the top left is 22-23, top right is 23-24, the bottom left is this current school year, 24-25. Again, this is just the first semester of each of these school years. And we're looking at fall break and Thanksgiving break. That's what the green arrows are pointing to in each of these graphs. The first one's fall break, the second arrow in each of the graphs is Thanksgiving break. So again, putting these in perspective, I calculated the average weekly absence from first semester for each of these 3 years. So on a regular school week over the past 3 years, our average absence rate was about 5.5%. All right, that's about 75 students a day on average or out in the school district. During fall break week, that was nearly 10%. Right, it's 140 students. Thanksgiving week, it was about 9%, 125-ish students. Other data I found particularly interesting, October 14th and 15th are the 2 least attended days so far in 24-25 school year. That's fall break. By far, those were the 2 worst as far as attendance goes. Thanksgiving week actually the attendance for Thanksgiving week has improved over the past 4 years, really, with an average absence rate of about 5.7% this year compared to 10.5% last year. So Thanksgiving week this year was really great for school attendance. Again, Thanksgiving week attendance has, like I said, improved over those last 4 years, from 11.2% compared to 7.8% just this past year. So again, those are the 2 that stand out the most as far as when you're looking at the graphs go. And then Thanksgiving a little bit better, or is improving, and fall break is just not great for attendance wise, as I'm
Scott,
sure our teachers can tell you. Yeah.
Question. Do you think fall break is affected by the fact that Tri-Central has the whole week off?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I'm
Right?
not going to see.
Because you have people teaching there and kids here or vice versa, and I just wonder. We also know that Tuesday is our worst day. We don't know why. And I wanted to know if Adam's working on Taco Tuesday to, we talked about this.
I'll
Okay.
this. And elementary, actually, pointed this out in one of our admin meetings. One of our best attendance days, our best attendance day in the elementary, Halloween.
Yeah.
Everybody's wearing costumes. Everybody's coming for the thing. Like, those are fun little pieces of nuggets of information. It's like, I wouldn't think that Halloween would be a big attendance day for school, but it is. I don't know how we leverage that. I think we've talked about having more dress-up days in the elementary. But again, that's the kind of data that we're starting to get that we can see compared to this year to the previous couple years. What are the trends we're seeing? So this is one of those trends that Dr. Glaze wanted to wait until after Thanksgiving break to kind of see, okay, maybe that's just a one-time thing. How does it look at Thanksgiving? How do we compare to the last few years? So again, things for us to consider, or for you to consider, I should say, as a board, is the purpose of the data, again, is to analyze, find ways for the school board to directly impact student attendance, right, by making small adjustments to our calendar. For example, we're already planning to move our fall district PD day to that Thursday Pork Festival, which was our 3rd worst attended day of the year so far. this is the first time, like I said, we've really had this data to analyze it well. And we also can compare it to other districts. While adding days to the end of the school year is a choice. We could do that. We could say, hey, let's just go ahead and get the whole fall break or all of Thanksgiving week off. Just tack those on at the end of the year. If you're looking to impact student performance on our accountability assessments, your ILANs, your SATs, the iReads, which now come along with a retention piece in the law, as far as if kids do not pass that, there is an opportunity to retain them. That just, by adding those to the end of the year, those days can't be used for instruction prior to those assessments. And so again, while we would still have those days, post those assessments, it's less, obviously effective for those assessment days. So again, kind of defeats the purpose there. That's why, again, we apply our flex days, our e-learning days prior to those end of the year add-on days. So that way we make sure we get as much instructional time before those accountability assessments as we can. Again, just a quick reminder, March 3rd is where SAT and iRead starts. That's 122 instructional days prior to that. And then for iLearn, it's 146 days. We start April 14th. So again, as much as we can kind of save on the front end, that instructional day, those instructional days, the better. Again, I know that, asking to move days from October to August is a big ask. Totally understand. I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. I just have to present this information to you guys. So that is something for you to consider. Any questions related to that very short data? It is a good question, though. One thing that, as far as how does other school districts in the area affect our students' attendance? I need to go through. It'll be a bit of a pain, but I can go through and look at when other schools, if they have fall break versus if they don't have fall break, and then how they all do their Thanksgiving breaks and compare their data over the last few years. If you're interested, taking a few, but I can get that. You guys need that to help you make a decision. Right.
Yeah, I mean, the Tri-Central data won't help because they don't have school that week.
Right. So
But,
again,
I mean, I
really,
think
it's
that's
not gonna-
potentially the problem, maybe.
I don't know that it's all surrounding districts. It's just within the county specifically. We have what seems like some shared things, but maybe. I don't think you need to do that yet, Scott. We'll let you know.
Also, on your Halloween thing, I'm thinking maybe, so we have school on Thanksgiving and on Christmas and New Year's Day. Those would be really well attended, right? I'm just following the data here.
idea. Excellent idea. I think that's great.
You won't
I'll
be
let
here.
you present
You
that.
won't be here.
I'm eager to see 4th of July attendance.
Well, one of the things that I would like to say is we are a small community, okay? So one of the other things that you could look at is what groups are traveling together, okay? And so you can have a couple families that are going on vacation together, and that can add up to a large number of students, okay?
Yeah.
One of the things we used to do in the operating room is we would find out when the doctor's vacations were. And then I could cut back on staffing when I knew some of those surgeons were gone. Vice versa in OB overstaffed always in September. Lots of babies were born in September. Okay. So, I think groups of people should stay together. That's how they're friends. That's what makes our community strong. And look at that piece, or we should think about that piece. We traveled with the same group of families when we took vacation. So, absolutely.
Well, and I think by creating this, especially giving us a week, so my family always travels for a week over Thanksgiving break. My kids always miss 2 weeks of school. Since this, I've changed my plans and we're going over fall break. My kids don't miss. So maybe it will help. Maybe people will plan to take vacations in October versus Thanksgiving break.
Thank you. Okay, next in your packet were the department reports that we received. Are there any questions from those? Okay. And then, Brooke, would you please give us the financial report? Would you mind moving your mic? Turn it back on. No? It's okay. Thanks.
For month end November, we finished in the education fund with $907,873.90, in operations, $137,653.86, debt service, $781,292.89, and rainy day, $3,833.41. The education fund revenues totaled $942,419, and Dr. Glaze and I were surprised that our summer school reimbursement came in at $71,383. The year before, it was more in the $42,000 range. I don't know if that's a focus on reading or what that was from, but anyway, we're
gonna
happy
see
with it.
that, yes, because we focus on reading.
Yeah. And then, $868,970 was for the basic grant payment. The DOE made an adjustment for our, October ADM count, so they do that in November and December. In January, the payment will bump back up to the $913,000 range. I called the auditor's office today to check on our property tax settlement and for the operations and debt service funds, and they said that they had submitted that to the state for churning and checking, so as soon as they get the approval, then they're gonna print the checks. They expect that to be by this Friday. And then after reviewing education operations fund appropriation balances remaining, along with expenses to be paid through the end of the year, we didn't see any need to request an additional this year. And then, as Dr. Glaze mentioned, the year-end transfer process of appropriation is a little different. You're just taking positive appropriation within a fund and shifting it to cover any negative lines so that they all come out in the positive. So I will do that and then report in January on that. And year-to-date interest so far is $548,276.98.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Just, yeah, maybe I missed it. So we're getting a check for debt service, because we'll probably do we have December debt service payments?
We do. And I have those all set up. Dr. Glaze just signed for them, so I told them when.
We gotta get the money
When
first.
right,
Yeah.
when they're making the determination on when they're gonna send us a payment, I have to have time to make the payment.
I was gonna say, it
get
seems
to
like
the
we're getting kind of
trustee.
late to not have that money yet.
Right.
Okay, that's what
I mean, yeah, I usually check with the, US Bank, who's our trustee that turns around then makes other payments with that to say, if I get this to you by this date, you have time to do what you need to do. So those are the things that keep me up at night.
yeah, I was
We
thinking,
We requested an early draw, but we didn't get
we didn't get it.
an early draw,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, we don't have any old business, so we will move on to our new business. Tonight, we need to approve the transfer of appropriations to close out the budget for 2024. In order to close out the budget, all major budget accounts must not show a deficit. Inter and intra-fund transfers of appropriations allow schools to transfer surplus appropriations to accounts needing additional appropriation. It is recommended that the board approve the transfer of appropriations to close the 2024 budget. A summary will be made available to the board at the January meeting. I need a motion and a second to approve the transfer of appropriations.
I move to approve the transfer of appropriations to close out the 2024 budget.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay,
Do you really look at this before you do budgets for next year?
I'm sorry, what?
The year-end changes that you're making to make every account positive. Are you really looking at that before you budget for the next year?
No, our budget process begins when we start drafting the budget in July and August. Now, what we can do is we can work into our documents what we think will come in under budget for 2024, which helps our 2025 budget. So that is something that we are considering, yes. So revenue streams, how much we're going to come in under budget, and how that's going to impact our 2025 budget. We have to post our budget documents in Gateway. We get that done in September, and then the public hearing for that is in October. And there are deadlines that Gateway or the DLGF gives us that we have to post those documents in there and get approval, or we get stuck with last year's rates and budgets.
So do you ever look at any trends any accounts that specifically you're always
Sure.
turning around?
I spend a lot of time trying to build the most perfect budget ever. And then some emergency or something out of the blue arises and any account can go negative quickly. Sometimes the state will come along. I can build my budget in August or September and the state will come along and change benefit codes, for example. I could build a budget with old benefit codes and then the DOE comes through and says, oh, by the way, we're changing all of these. Short-term disability is now going under this. And you have to add subcategories to all the ends of your benefit codes to account for who's a teacher, who's a counselor, who's a, oh my goodness, other collective bargaining member. And suddenly my budget is no longer, I can't just press a button and make it happen. I have to make changes all the time, so. I really try to build the great budget, but things change continuously.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe this is still a rookie question that we don't know what those numbers will be, but we have to approve the moving of the money. It just seems a little,
Well, we don't
Odd.
even know what our curricular material reimbursement's gonna be.
right.
Like, they're gonna tell us in December, and you guys are gonna be discussing it tonight, right?
Right, I guess I'm sort of asking that more for them,
Yeah.
that it's like,
Yeah,
we have to approve it now, but you won't have all the money and the balances until the end of the year.
we don't even know what
But you have to
our,
have it done in January,
Right.
so it's,
well, just like our October ADM count, we're building a budget based on what we think it'll be. And then the count day comes. And you just
So
have
do you
to,
know right now which accounts are negative?
I could probably run a report to show you. I mean, I'll report that in January. You'll see the ins and outs of every line, but your appropriation report that I put in the board documents would have all of those lines that are negative or over expended. And other things that can change, or you maybe you miscoded someone, like we have a calculation we do for maintenance of effort with related to special education. Maybe you found that a teacher was being paid out of a general high school line, but they're really teaching a special education class. We've had to do some cleanup of those things and make sure their benefits were coded right so that we can simply generate a report and, you know, have the info readily available and at our fingertips. So usually there's cleanup throughout the year. You just find something that was maybe paid out of the wrong line and you have to reverse it or whatever.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. All right. All those in favor to approve the transfer of appropriations signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next, we need to approve a resolution allowing the use of debt service operating balance to reduce the tax rate. Last month, the high school executive plan for roofing systems was presented to the board. In order to issue a general obligation bond for the roof project, the 2025 debt service tax rate must be below 40 cents. By using the operating balance and debt service, we can lower the tax rate to 39 cents. In your packet is a resolution allowing the superintendent to use operating balance to lower the tax rate. It is recommended the board approve the resolution as written. Need a motion and a second to approve the resolution.
I move to approve the resolution allowing the use of debt service operating balance to reduce the tax rate.
Okay, need a second? Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
Why do we want to reduce?
Part of what Barry was talking about was House Bill 1499. If we want to issue a GO bond in 25, we would have to have a rate under 40 cents. So it would take approximately, we have to work with the GF on exactly what that number is. But we're thinking around 150,000 of our operating balance in debt service in order to bring down the rate to 39 cents. Currently, the rate is around 41 cents.
But we don't know that we're going to need that. are you sure we're gonna need $150,000?
We're not. That would be, we would only use that operating balance if we would have an issue with tax draw. But there's a stronger likelihood that that will not be an issue because of the rate in which that we normally get our tax dollars. We have over 100% of our tax money that comes in some cases. Particularly whenever they're paying, a lot of people just pay their tax bill all at one time. So occasionally we get more than what we're expecting.
So what happens if we would approve this tonight and then decide as a board we don't want to issue a go bond?
Nothing.
So nothing to be transferred.
But if we want to, we would have to do it. So, yeah. But if you don't, if we decide not to, it's just gonna be it'll be 39 cents and that won't have any impact.
So I'm going to abstain from the vote. November 27th, I had asked for some information from Baker Tilly around our other funding options. There's some confusing proposals from, there's one from Baker Tilly that issues the bond in 25. There's another one that Andrew Manna reviewed that issues it in 26. And so I'm just going to recuse myself because I don't have enough data to make the vote. And so I'm not opposed to the debt and all that other stuff, but I'm not comfortable with the. I asked for that information on the 27th of November, and I don't have the answer to those questions tonight, and so I can't vote on this in good conscience.
I would say, I read the resolution like 19 times and it doesn't seem specific to me that's what it's for. It seems very open-ended. The operations, it mentions all, like, your ability to move money around with no dollar amounts and it doesn't mention that it's for this specific purpose.
I think that's just the way that resolution was written. Really, all of this is going to do is impact the debt service.
But that's not, you understand?
I do,
That's
I
not
get
what
it.
it says.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
for me to sign off on it,
Mhm.
it needs to say what we're talking about. It's very open-ended.
Sure.
And I'm not comfortable with that. It's not a distrusting of you. It's signing onto a document that doesn't say what I understand it's supposed to do. The two don't seem to match. I mean, I read all the emails, the 150,000. We've talked about this for a long time. I understand what we're trying to do. I understand why we're trying to do it, but that is not what the resolution says specifically.
Okay.
Would it accomplish this? Yes, but I think it opens the door to, it doesn't say a dollar amount. And so it's concerning to me
Yeah, and it's probably not going to say a dollar amount because
we don't know what the dollar amount is, but it's
Right.
also not specific to what we're trying to accomplish. It doesn't just say we're trying to move money from debt service for this. It doesn't give a purpose.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I'm not accusing anyone of anything.
no,
I'm just
no,
reading
no,
that
no,
and
no.
I know what we're talking about, and I don't think
Right.
the words on the paper match what we're trying to do. And they're not specific enough for my comfort level.
Would the board want to table this? And we could potentially have a special meeting once we get more information and maybe a better resolution, more specific? That would be the question that would be worth asking.
I'm not voting for it the way it's written.
Okay.
And Rob's not voting for it the way, because he hasn't had his questions answered, which I completely understand. So if we have time to do that, I would prefer, because
Okay. I mean, we can
Just a
just,
special meeting.
we would just have a special meeting and we can do that.
okay, I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
just,
Well, I mean, this is an unusual thing to do, for one thing. I mean, and this is all kind of part of this, of House Bill 1499. And, so it's one of the, it's just kind of different territory. than what most schools have had to go through in order to do this. So.
I understand,
yeah.
but I hope you understand my.
No, I
point.
do. No, I absolutely do. And there's a lot of legalese in that resolution. I get that.
And the question to Baker Tilly is that it's 41 cents this year. If you look at every chart we've been given, it's 41 cents the next year and the following year. And so my question to them is, every year, are we going to be appropriating $150,000 to bring that under so we can borrow more money? And so I don't think I can vote on
No, I
this
get
until
that.
I understand
Right.
that fund does not make $150,000 a year. So
And I'll be
eventually
really
you run
honest.
out of other people's
No,
money,
no, I
right?
get it.
So.
I'll be really honest, Rob. I just got that from Bellevue and I just didn't have time to get it out, but I will send that out tonight.
That's fine.
But it's, again, I think that what Bellevue writes will clarify that.
Because we don't have any bonds falling off the books for 3 years or 3 or 4 years, right?
We're paying off the Geo bond, the 2017.
But that's December,
That's December.
right? But for the
Right.
next 3 years, we're
Correct.
at red line.
Nothing,
That's
nothing
right.
nothing's coming off.
Correct.
Yes. Then I think that's the 2017 series.
Series.
Yes.
Yeah, there's 2017,
Yeah.
but the last payment is sometime in 28.
I think, gosh,
Probably December, right, Bro? It's probably half and half.
do we need to do that? We have a lawyer in the room. Table, vote to table.
Mm-hmm. That's a 25, and then it's 4 years until, and then in 20, or 28, and then 28, and then 29, we lose another geo bond from 23, which is probably the transportation
Yes.
bond.
Yes.
Okay, I think then at this time, I need a motion and a second to table our agenda item 11.2, the approval of a resolution allowing the use of debt service operating balance to reduce the tax rate.
I move to table the resolution allowing the use of debt service operating balance to reduce the tax rate.
I second it.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, we will table that. Okay, for our next conversation and decision is the proposed calendar update for 2025, 2026. This fall, Western School Corporation, KSEC, LEA, passed their 2025, 2026 calendar with fall break on the third full week of October and the alignment of spring break with the week of April 1st. This has been the traditional breaks for all the KSEC schools with the exception of this year. For this reason, we are requesting the board amend the 2025, 2026 calendar to align the corporation breaks with the rest of KSEC schools. In addition, we are requesting the corporation move to a full week of fall break to avoid two-day weeks, currently fall break and Thanksgiving break weeks. The 2 days before the current fall break would be added to the beginning of the school year. And option 2 is added that eliminates a snow makeup day and adds 1 day to the end of the year, sorry. In the future, we will move our calendar discussions from spring to the fall of the year to ensure our breaks align with other K-6 schools. So at this time, I need a motion and a second to approve the proposed calendar update, and we can have a discussion on which option we prefer to have.
I move to approve the proposed calendar update for the 2025-2026 school years.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so I think you probably had an opportunity to review the calendars that were in our packet. The first one was the one that was proposed and had us beginning school on August 6th and ending on May 28th. Another option on the second, so I think the only difference, if I'm correct, Mr. Jaworski, Dr. Glaze, is that instead we would move our date to start a little bit later in August and get out a little bit later in May. Some people, I mean,
Yeah.
lots
It's
of
either-
reasons for that.
Yeah, either adding to the end or adding to the beginning. So either way.
So it's really just a preference at this point.
Well, but
Doesn't
besides
change
that,
graduation
I like
date.
Scott's point about the number of school days prior to the testing. And is that option 2?
One.
That's option 1? Will we start earlier?
By 2 days?
It's one day.
Yeah.
Isn't it just one? Because we added
It would be 2 days,
the sixth, the eighth,
Yeah.
yeah, the eighth,
but
yeah.
if you wanted to go ahead and eliminate a snow makeup day, we could just add one day and then go ahead and eliminate the snow makeup.
I don't
day.
like starting earlier.
I know, I agree, I agree. I agree, and that would mean we would have our teacher day on the 6th, our student day would be the,
What you're talking, the
7th.
other one?
if we just added a day to the beginning of the year and then we just didn't, we would just exclude a snow makeup day after spring break. So that way it's not putting 2 days at the beginning, we're just adding one day.
I'm all for adding at the end of the year versus the beginning. Friday.
I think kids are still working in August.
Yeah, I don't like starting
Give them
early.
another day to make money.
And enjoy the weather.
with high
What if we
schools.
kept October break and we told them Halloween was on that Tuesday?
I like that thinking.
Look, I'm trying to use the data that provides.
I like that thinking, Eric. I think that's great.
We'll just move Halloween.
That's right.
How hard can that be?
So with the draft 2, we start on the 8th of August, and then we get out on a Friday, the 29th. Okay. And then we still have, we took away the flex day at the end of spring break.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Which honestly is not, usually we don't have a lot of trouble with kids coming back on that Monday.
Right.
We always have trouble with kids leaving early.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a big deal at all.
I mean, if we took away a snow makeup day, would we take away February 13th?
You could, that one too. I mean, we can just eliminate a snow makeup day. And you can
Unless,
just,
the concern would be then if we needed the snow days to get in our days before testing and,
right. Yeah, that's true.
which I remember having an elementary teacher talk to me about wanting those days when they were concerned when we were going to do a 2-week
Sure.
spring break with all those flex days. The concern for them was having enough days to do instruction
Right.
prior to, spring break time in April. And so,
So right now on the second one, February 13th, that Friday is a,
Flex day.
That's a
Flex
flex
day.
day.
We
I
would
would
have the
say-
day off unless there'd been a snow day prior
Correct.
to that day. And then
Correct.
we would go, or we would have a e-learning day.
We would go
We would
because
go.
we only can have 3 learning days.
Uh-huh.
And so this would be after we'd missed 3 days. Well, actually 4 days because President's Day would be in there.
right,
And then, so we would have to have missed 4 days and then we would have to make up that day on the 13th.
well, I'd say
person.
again, families are probably gonna plan that weekend to go somewhere.
If we have President's Day and a flex day, give 'em- yeah.
Yeah.
That fourth
Um,
weekend.
am I wrong? Between option 1 and option 2, we're only ending one day later.
Yes,
Mhm.
because we eliminated
Flex day.
a flex day.
And starting 2 days later.
Right,
The
right.
same
Or
I just
actually
wanted,
starting the same time that we already planned,
Okay.
which is
Day.
Thursday work day, Friday first student day.
Friday for student day.
That's what that was my question too.
Yeah,
Thursday.
our teachers love
I
the
love
Friday
that.
and
When I
Teachers
taught, I
do love
loved it, just like a 2-day or whatever first week.
it really
Yeah.
helps us
It's
on
great.
the transportation side, I'll be really honest, because
Getting
it
the
gives
bugs
us the
out.
weekend to figure some things out and Monday goes a whole lot better.
I mean, I guess I would support option 2, especially because hopefully with having full weeks in October now, that would give a good consistent timeline to education, and allow our kids to work longer in the summer.
I I agree.
I move to approve the second option for the calendar.
Second.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I heard we used to have a kind of a calendar committee. Do you think it would be beneficial to have different people from different areas of the school looking at this besides?
I hear a volunteer. That's what they do to me.
You gotta be careful, you gotta be careful.
On the committee.
We can do that, yeah, but really, yeah,
So they already
but,
had input to it.
yeah.
or-
And typically what I will do is we'll kind of give drafts to the association and have them go ahead and take a look at it. And then we talk about it during our meet and discuss time. So we do that. Yeah, I mean, and that's something we can continue to do.
Is the
But
calendar
now
not
that-
part of the contract? Is it your contract?
No.
It used to be.
It did,
Yeah, okay.
it did.
You can tell I have a little gap in my.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, they
It was
had,
negotiated by the teachers
right.
and was
And
part of the,
that all changed
do you
in
remember that?
2008, I believe.
Yeah.
Eric had a chalkboard in his room.
And outdated maps, because the wall had come down.
Okay, at this time, all those in favor of approving the option 2 for the proposed calendar signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, thank you. Lastly, we need to approve the adoption of supplemental curricular materials for the spring semester of 2025 and beyond. Earlier, Mr. Jaworski actually did not, right? No proposal, but anyways, it is included in your packet, the list of supplemental curricular materials. And so I just need a motion and a second to approve that adoption.
He will answer any questions, by the way. So,
That was the whole committee that
yes.
did that.
Yeah.
I move to approve the adoption of supplemental curricular materials for the spring semester 2025 and beyond.
I'll second that.
Okay, are there any questions or comments for Mr. Jaworski?
So what does this mean? So,
Great
like,
question.
so, I mean, so Mrs. Cole, she's, whatever, you or her
Yeah.
wrote this and it's
Yeah.
great, very informative. The total cost is there, but what does this mean? This means something in addition to
Right, this
what
means
we've
that
already
we
allocated.
are giving permission to use public dollars to pay for these things. Now, I will say, the more I think about it, I'm not 100% sure if we need, yeah, we probably do, because they're books. For Miss Neely and Miss Miller, those are being paid out of a high ability grant. So we don't need approval for that. Like that goes through me. However, because they're books, committee reviews that and recommends, hey,
Okay.
these books are okay. Like
So,
we'll give you
so
kids
people have
athletes, right?
looked at this
for,
and,
for Ms. Cole's, it's a non-consumable supplemental curriculum material. Basically, it's something that relates to content and pretty much everything that's related to content that's being paid with state dollars, which we shifted from collecting money from families to pay for these things. So now state money is paying for these things. If state money is paying for these things, now the governing body is responsible for what is going in our students' hands. Even more so. So in this case here, simply we're saying, yes, we are okay with our students having access to this particular thing being paid for out of state dollars.
okay,
So it's going to happen every semester. The way we kind of worked it out is we'll do one in the spring, one in the fall. We did this last spring, if you recall, those of on the board who were there, where it was the first time, right? We had all those different curriculum materials that are like, hey, our teacher want to use this, but it's not part of the core curriculum. That's part of the adopted curriculum, right? That's the core. This is the supplemental piece. This is all stuff. That's all the extra things that teacher like. We really would like to have this added to our curriculum so that we can better support our students, whether it's through interventions, which is what Mrs. Cole's example is here. It's for review and remediation type stuff. But yeah, it's something that we just will do it for spring every fall until change the law again. But yeah, no, it's a bit tedious because again, and I'll be transparent about it. Like it's hard to get people to join these committees.
Sure,
It's
yeah.
one unpaid, two. It's really inconvenient time, and it's just something where it's like we need to get it done. So we get a team together as best we can. We make a recommendation, we present to you guys. It's very much bureaucratical stuff that is just it just feels like a lot of spinning wheels, but it's technically by the book. We'll get it approved, so.
And then finally, all this is through for Mr. Ayers and middle school. This is open to any teacher in any building to be able to
For
request
Mrs.
this.
Coles, I believe it's just for her class. And then the books for Mrs. Neely's honors class and Mrs. Miller's honors class are just for high ability only. Because of where it's coming from, high ability funds can only go for only high ability resources.
Gotcha.
Came from a comments about that. It's been very touchy about how those high ability dollars are spent. So yeah.
Okay. But, and I asked a terrible question, so I apologize. My question is, this is open to anybody. The fact that it's all
yes.
middle school
Yeah,
is
but only
ironic. Okay.
middle school
Right.
requested. I think everyone else got their stuff back in the spring.
Okay.
And because I went to every team meeting to explain this whole process to them because it is complicated and it's tedious and it's just, to be honest, a bit of a nightmare to manage. So when we did this fall one, I sent out a message to all the staff and I only had the 3 middle school requests.
Perfect.
So
All right.
I was thankful for that, but again, yeah, we'll have another one of these in the spring.
Thank you.
Real quick, speaking of books and money, with the change in, we couldn't charge a book rental and the state was gonna reimburse us, and we never knew how that was gonna work out. Dr. Glaze, did it? Was it close?
Well, we'll know here in a couple of days. It's,
I'd never heard a follow-up. We were very concerned about,
well,
It was-
we're-
it was
we're
some fuzzy
actually
math.
A little more concerned this year because we thought we would have that money and we don't have it yet. So,
oh,
and we haven't heard exactly what the per pupil or allocation.
and that's true
will be.
across the state, not just us.
Not just, yeah, it's everybody.
Okay. That's why I haven't heard how it went.
Correct. So we're playing the game on that one, which is one of the reasons why we don't know what to do with negative balances and different things like
Right.
that.
If they don't give us the money, we have
Right.
to balance the books.
Right.
Anything else? Okay. All those in favor of approving the adoption of supplemental curricular materials, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, lastly, a couple matters to come before the board. First, I'll ask, does anyone have any other matters to bring before the board at this time? Okay. Tonight we would, I know Dr. Glaze mentioned this, but we would like to honor our departing board members who are not here, but still give a minute to just talk about them. We'd like to honor Amber Rodabaugh and Susan Sloan for their service as members of the Tipton Community School Corporation Board of School Trustees. We're so appreciative of their time and commitment to our schools and community over the last 4 years. The board has a small present that we will get to them in time, but we just want to honor them and thank them so much for their time. Lastly, we don't have any advisory committees this month. Our scheduled events, December 11th is the middle school and high school band Christmas concert. December 17th is the YO Family Night Concert, 7. Our last day of the second grading period in semester 1 is December 20th. And then December 21st through January 6th is the winter break. January 7th is the first day of the third grading period in semester 2, and January 14th is our next board meeting. So at this time, I need a motion and a second to adjourn the December board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Have a Merry Christmas.
You too.
Don't leave.